Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and I'm here at the Shooters Outpost Museum in Hooksett, New Hampshire, taking a look at what is, I think, without any doubt, both the least comfortable and the coolest looking version of the Stemple STG-76. So, if you haven't seen my earlier videos on the Stemple STG-76, I'll link to the main one in the end cards of this video. Check it out. It'll give you the background of why these guns are a thing. The short version is they are a bunch of transferrable receivers that were in legal limbo until about 2004, when they started being manufactured under the guise of how can we make this a really interesting, practical, modular, tube-based submachine gun for recreational civilian shooting. And the really cool thing about them is, by making them modular and by not permanently modifying the receiver in any of the configurations, you're able to swap the gun out into a bunch of different configurations. So the original version was like a heavy submachine gun, maybe akin to a ZK-383, with a good pistol grip and solid wood shoulder stock and a bipod and a drum magazine. These are all sort of fundamentally based on the Suomi KP31 infrastructure. So they all use Suomi magazines. I have this one set up with a 50-round coffin mag at the moment. They all have basically Suomi bolts, recoil springs, rear sights, that sort of thing. But what this configuration did, this by the way is the STG-34k, 34 of course because it has an Mg34 grip assembly, which is weird. Like, you look at that and you're like, of all the things, why an Mg34? Now, because these are live machine guns, there doesn't have to be any alteration made to machine gun grip assemblies that are used as their trigger components. So the basic early ones have essentially Suomi fire control groups with a Suomi selector lever. The Thompson one that we took a look at uses a completely unmodified, intact Thompson lower with Thompson controls. This one has an Mg34 fire control group, and it works just like an original 34, where you have a two-finger trigger. One finger is semi-auto. If you pull the top finger, it's semi-auto. If you pull the bottom, it's full auto. Now, the reason for the Mg34 fire control grip, there actually is a reason, and it is that the company that makes these, BRP, at one point experimented with an AR-15 upper that was essentially an Mg34. The idea being you could get a belt-fed 8mm Mauser Mg34 that you could mount on an AR-15 lower, either a semi-auto lower or, in theory, a full-auto lower, which would be pretty cool. Like, it's the economy way to have an Mg34. That project is a subject for a different video, but as a result of doing that, BRP bought a whole bunch of Mg34 parts kits at a time when they were reasonably affordable, and because they were doing this for an AR-15 lower, they ended up with a lot of Mg34 grips kind of lying around extra. And so in the early 2000s, we're talking 2005, 6, 7, in that time period, they look at those and go, well, hey, you know, that'd be like, why don't we use those? That's a fully functional grip assembly for a machine gun. And so thus is born the basis of the idea for the STG-34k. It also has a couple other differences from some of the other configurations of STG, so let's take a look up close. This thing really has substantially different vibes from the rest of the Stemple guns. Man, it's just really neat looking. So you cannot unfold the stock while you have a magazine in the gun. You also cannot fold the stock at all if you are using a drum magazine, which the gun will fit, just not with the folding stock there. So let's unfold that. So that locks out like so. Now I can actually fit a drum in it there, and it'll run, but like I said, the stock won't collapse over the drum, obviously. As usual, we have our Stemple receiver tube markings here. It's still a model 7645. Because this is an older one that doesn't have Picatinny rail, instead it has a Suomi KP31 rear sight, so it still has the Suomi Tikkakoski markings on the rear sight. And then of course we have BRP's information here and their model designation of 34k. Now the takedown, like the assembly of this gun is a little bit different from some of the other STGs in that in order to fit the Mg34 grip, they had to build essentially a lower assembly that sort of mimics the Mg34 receiver, just so that everything fits in place. They had to make a couple changes to the fire control parts in the 34 grip assembly, primarily like making the sear taller so it can stick up far enough into the tube to properly interact with the bolt like a submachine gun. The original Mg34 design, the sear can be much lower because the working parts are lower in the gun. And you can see at the back here, there is still the rear receiver plug held in place by a pin coming in from the top, but the new lower assembly caps over the back of the receiver as well. So you have to take this screw out, you can slide this clip off, and then you can disassemble it much like a regular Stemple. The trigger group itself is held on with 2 pins, just as it originally would be. And then the K part of the designation comes from the fact that they have used a Swedish pattern, short barrel and short barrel shroud on these instead of the Finnish longer pattern. So this is about a 9-inch barrel instead of the Finns having about a 12-inch barrel. It also has a flush muzzle, of course, no muzzle break out there. Beyond that, operation is basically the exact same as all the other Stemples. It's got standard, this is 9mm, fires from an open bolt. And like I said, the top trigger is semi-auto. You can see it's marked E for Einzelfeuer and D for Dauerfeuer, or multiple shot. So if I pull and hold the top trigger, the gun's going to reset with each shot. If I pull and hold the bottom trigger, it will continue running until I release the trigger. And we still have the original Mg34 safety, which I have to have the bolt back to engage, but there's your safety, ready to fire and in the safe position. The version of this that's still being offered today is a little bit different in that I believe they've stopped putting on AK underfolders, which have got to be just awful. It feels awful to handle it. I can't imagine it's any better to actually shoot. They have replaced that with what looks like a much more comfortable style of folding stock with a real butt plate and rubber butt pad and that sort of thing. But I thought this one would be a really cool one to show you because I think the underfolder, while it is, I'm pretty sure it's going to be awful to shoot, it does look really cool. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. I'm really frankly impressed by what BRP has in the Stemple modular, well, the Stemple takedown gun modular system. I think there's a lot of really clever engineering that's gone into it, and it's really interesting to look at all the different variations that they've come up with. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.